love yourself so that you can love others, right? Let people see how you're caring for yourself so that then you can love them like you love yourself, right? When you care for yourself, you also give permission to others, for others to do the same. We are in another week this month where we're talking about self-care and self-love. And as I first actually stepped into this month, I was a little bit nervous because self-care, in my past used to be this kind of topic where I just kind of, I don't know, irked at, is that the right word? I just kind of like turned a shoulder at when women would be like, oh, I went and got a massage, or I went and I do all these facials and this is self-care. I don't know. I just thought, man, that's for the weak. That's what I literally thought that. Now, I love my facials. I love my massages. I love my hobbies and things that I put in my life for self-care now. And I look back at my younger self and kind of laugh because I'm like, what was I thinking of not wanting to care for myself? And when I look back, I also see multiple cycles of burnout. And so I think it's really important for us to actually know, the importance of self-care, right? And the importance of that in our life. And that is all that we've been talking about this month. So let me get into today, because today I want to kind of focus on this idea, not this idea, but this feeling of guilt. Because when we think of self-care or we think of self-love, we're tackling also this big obstacle that many of us face, and that is guilt. We know that we need rest. We know we need time for ourselves. We know that we actually need to prioritize that. And when it actually comes down to prioritizing rest or self-care, we get this guilt that creeps in. I can even think of like when I first had Jaden, like my firstborn, right? Now I have 3 kids and I've gone through 3 newborn stages. And if you are a mom and you can remember this vividly, like the first time you're ever away from your kid and you have like a moment to shower or something. And it's like the greatest moment. And at the same time, you feel guilty for being away from your baby because you're like, I have to keep that baby alive. I don't know if you guys have felt that, but I when I think of like the most extreme type of moment where I've really felt guilt, it's been in this idea of this newborn stage. And so here's the truth here that I want us to kind of start it in is you cannot give your best to others when you are running on empty. We talked about this last week. We talked about this week before. I'm pretty sure we talked about it in the first week of this year. But you just can't. You cannot give your best to others when you're running on empty. And so caring for yourself is essential. It's not this selfish act. It's essential, and it's an act of sustainability. How are you going to continue to care for yourself so that you can sustain yourself, so that you can continue to show up, so that you can love your neighbor well, right? The Bible says love your neighbor as yourself. How are we supposed to love our neighbor if we're not starting with loving ourselves? And so let's start there. Let's start with just giving ourselves a little bit of break, taking a deep breath and saying, hey, it's okay to prioritize this. The second thing that I really want you guys to know here, and this is actually really the first thing that I want us to start with, and foundationally as we go through this, we're really kind of tearing apart this idea of guilt. But I want us to understand that guilt isn't something that is just like part of who we are. It's really this learned thing. It's not truth. It's something we have learned. It's something that has seeped into who we are. And that comes in a lot of different ways. Most of us grew up in environments, especially if you grew up in an environment, anything like me, but grew up in environments where productivity was praised, right? It's like the more you're productive, the more you're praised, the more achievements or accolades you got, the more you're praised. And rest was seen as this weakness, right? Like, why do you have to nap? Why do you have to slow down? What's wrong with you? And I could just remember this at a young age. Like, it was go, go, go. How many activities can we be in? How many things can you learn? Oh my gosh, let's test her in this. Now, what I'll say about my parents is my parents are amazing, and their work ethic is one of a kind. And they are hard freaking workers. Like, very, very hard workers, and they have passion and love for what they do. And they also have days where they don't like what they do, but they still show up and they're still consistent. And so I am absolutely grateful for the upbringing that I received. And so this is not throwing shade at my parents and being like, oh my gosh, they worked all the time and that's seeped into who I am. No, I think they were beautiful examples. Now, what I think we can always improve on is how do we rest? I was talking to my mom the other day, and it was her birthday back in December. So the other day, a couple months ago, we talk almost every day, but we were talking about her birthday, and she was saying, oh, well, I'm going to take off. And I was like, you're going to take off of work. Now, if any of you are listening and know my mom, like this, that's a big thing. And at the end of last year, she said, yeah, I think I'm going to start prioritizing myself more and actually like take vacation days like I can. My mother is in her 60s and she's the most lovely human being. And if she's listening to this, you know I love you with my whole heart. And I was so proud of her when she said that, because she's worked her butt off. And at the same time, she feels guilty for taking off because she feels guilty of letting down her clients and letting down her colleagues. It's just this idea of who she is. She's a nurturer and a helper and a lover of all souls. And so she gives. And for her to say, hey, I'm gonna give to myself and care for myself, I was like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. And so I don't know if that is you today, but I want you to understand that you can care for yourself. So we have over the years, been conditioned to believe that we must be constantly doing, and we must be constantly giving, and we must be serving to the utmost of that we can and of our values. And that is truly a false belief system that we carry, and we need to be challenged in that narrative. We need to be challenged and understand and replace it with the truth that rest and care are necessary. Can we say that together? Rest and care are necessary. And I know this might sound very elementary to some of you, like, oh man, I'm the queen of rest. For me, and I think most of this community, we struggle with this, and I think we're really self-aware. I think we've gotten to that point. We're self-aware. We understand our triggers. We get it. And we still push through it. We still push through it when it gets hard. And guess what? That will lead to burnout. And I don't want you guys to lead to burnout. So it's really time for us to unlearn the world's definition of worth. It's like time for us to embrace like what God has in front of us, right? And it's this truth about rest and care. There is a verse, it's Romans 12:2, and I love this verse. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of a spirit or by the renewing of your mind. And a lot of this too is obviously leading back to Jesus, leading back to the Holy Spirit and who we are in Christ and the renewal of that. So do not conform to the patterns of this world. Do not conform to what people are telling you. Do not conform to people saying you're crazy, right? All these different things. But really, do not conform to the pattern of these worlds. This world is so temporary. So like, let's sit and be transformed in the renewing of our mind. And what that means is, what are we putting in our mind? And if we're putting those lies in our mind that we constantly have to be moving, we constantly have to be doing, we constantly have to be giving, then yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really hard to battle that. And so we need to renew our mind, we need to renew our spirit, and we need to rest in that and rest and know that rest is good. And also rest is a true form of trust in God. We often don't rest because we think everything depends on us. We think we have to control the narrative. We have to control the story. We tell ourselves if we take a break that things are going to fall apart. If we say no, someone is going to be disappointed. But the truth is, when we rest, we are showing an act of faith, and we're saying, God, I trust you. God, you are enough. God, I understand that you've got this, and I can pause, and I trust the world will keep turning even if I step away. I trust that you are going to take care of those clients, and you're going to take care of the friends. And guess what? If I say no because I need to say no, it's going to be okay. And I trust you. So rest is this form of trusting in God. It's this form of saying, okay, you got this. Because God's presence is always with us. He's always here. He's always there. Whether or not we want to acknowledge him or not, he's there, and he's saying, I got you. And sometimes he's going to carry you. Sometimes y'all are going to walk hand in hand. And sometimes, y'all are just going to be standing right beside each other. But he's always there. He's not going to let you down. And I think a lot of this, when I struggle with this. I struggle with this concept of, it sounds bad, but of trust, in the sense of completely full abandonment trust. Because I do struggle with that saying, okay, if I step away, if I step away, things are going to be okay, right? Or if I take a break, like, will it continue to progress at the speed that I want it to progress? As a CEO, as a executive director, as well as a nonprofit, when you're constantly fund development, you're constantly dreaming, you're constantly visioning, when does that stop, right? And I have to remind myself that in order for the vision to continue to have fruition, in order for the vision to continue to be beautiful and bright and long and have longevity, man, I have to rest. I have to stop. Because if I rest and I allow my head to get a little bit above water, right? So I'm not drowning, but I can breathe, then that vision is going to be so much greater. But I have to rest in the acknowledgement of knowing that God's got it. And God will always have it because he knows the plans ahead of me. And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago of him knowing the plans of what's in front of us. And sometimes that can be scary. It's like, okay, well, if I choose this way or I choose that way, God already knows. But no matter what your choice is, he's going to bring it back to his will. He's going to bring it back to what he has in sight for you. And he's going to bring it back to match the exact thing he made you to do. So trust in that. Trust in your intuition. We also just need to start prioritizing ourselves. And I think prioritizing ourselves is the hardest form of self-care, of saying, because it goes back to feeling selfish, and then it goes back to then having this perpetuated type of feeling into guilt. But prioritizing yourself is a form of setting the standard for others, right? We go back to the beginning of what we talked about when we first got into this episode. It was like, love yourself so that you can love others, right? Let people see how you're caring for yourself so that then you can love them like you love yourself, right? When you care for yourself, you also give permission to others, for others to do the same. Whether it's your family or your employees or your team or your friends, they're watching how you treat yourself. And then it gives them permission to show up and do the same for themselves. You set that culture, you set that pace, you set those boundaries around you. And so if we're constantly running at a space and a place where we're on empty, if we're constantly pushing through exhaustion and we're ignoring our needs, we send the message to other people that rest is not valuable. We send the message that rest is for the weak, right? Like from the very beginning, we send a message that productivity and checklists and all of that is how life needs to be lived. And if we constantly keep living in that speed as well, again, we're not going to be our best, but people are going to meet us with exhaustion. People are going to meet us at that space as well. And they're going to think that they have to work just as much, is just as hard, and that they don't have, they just don't have permission to rest, especially in an employee setting. Like if you have employees where their communication style is different and they're like, one of the, in StrengthsFinder, Gallup StrengthsFinder, there's a strengths called responsibility. And this person, if you have responsibility as one of your top 5 strengths, you take that to heart. Like when you're given something to do in your job description or in your weekly task, you are going to, no matter what it takes, you're going to be responsible for that task. So if that means you are staying up until 2 a.m., if that means you're going to work throughout the weekend, you feel responsible for that. And there's a beauty to having responsibility as a strength. And there's also this shadow side of having responsibility, because if you do not communicate that well to your leader of like what you're feeling or whatnot, then you'll overwork yourself. So for instance, I'm a visionary, and when I have someone who has responsibility on my team and I say, hey, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this, but they don't come back and ask me, okay, Jenny, like what's the priority of this week? Then that individual will think everything that I just said to them, they're responsible for in that week. And guess what? They're going to work, and they're going to work themselves to exhaustion. And then they're going to see you, aka me, as an example. And if I'm not finding rest, they're going to think they can't rest either. So if you are in a leadership position, and most of you are, whether that is for your kids at home, or maybe you're, again, a teacher, or maybe you, again, lead a team, no matter what it is, like people are watching you, and they might not be giving you feedback or saying anything, but people are always watching. And so we need to be mindful of that. We need to set that example that boundaries are necessary. Self-care is essential, and burnout is not a badge of honor. It's not a badge of honor. So I want to say this again. Boundaries are necessary. Self-care is essential, and burnout is not a badge of honor. We actually help shift the culture around us if we set examples of that, right? We can shift what's going on around us, because the people who are near to us, the people who are in those energy fields, the people that we can help influence are going to see the importance of that. They're going to see the importance. This is something I feel like that has been a lifelong journey for me, and I'm perfectly imperfect at it. Yeah. Perfectly imperfect, but I try every day knowing that when I step into a room, I hold space, I hold energy for people. What does that mean? And I cannot hold energy for people if I am not filled. I can't do it. And if I'm not filled and I'm not setting boundaries and I'm not making the care for myself essential, then I'm going to be snappy with you. I'm going to be irritated with you. And it's not you. It's not you. It's me at my wit's end, me leading in exhaustion, me leading in a way that is not, that is, again, of an empty vessel. And so we need to make sure that we understand we actually can cause a ripple effect of change in the way that other people are caring for themselves, in the way that other people set their standards for what well-being is. We can start that ripple and we can start being an example for that. And so I encourage you today, I encourage you to think of who's around you. Who do you influence? Who's in your spaces? Because we need to prioritize ourselves and set standards for others. We also need to remember that guilt is often learned. It's not a truth, right? And we have to unlearn that rest is selfish, because it's not. We need to understand that rest is a form of trusting God. And when we rest, we acknowledge that He is in control, and that we truly can rest. Not everything is going to fall apart, right? And we can be culture shifters. You can be culture shifters. And I encourage you to think of that. Like, you are the start of a ripple. And I hope that when you start to feel guilty, you can and think back to this podcast. I encourage you actually to have some reflection time of moments in your life where you've actually potentially felt guilty. And when we do feel guilty, like, what does that look like? So maybe spend some time in a journal and think about, where are you feeling guilty about self-care? And what are some false narratives that you've been taught about in your life? And what would you change if you started to trust that? If you trusted that rest is part of the plan? So what would you change if you trusted that rest was part of the plan, not a distraction from it? What would you change if you trusted that rest is part of the plan and not a distraction from it? I encourage you to try to wipe that guilt away. And when that guilt tries to creep in and it tries to set lies in your soul and your mind, that you meet it with a firm no, and you meet it with the boundaries that need to be set, and you walk bravely forward, knowing that you deserve to be deeply loved for and cared for. Friends, I love you so much. I am beyond honored to have you a part of this community. And I hope that you understand, that you're just special, and you're deeply loved in all the right ways, in all the right places and spaces and all the things. And find a community that reminds you of that, because you should never forget that. So we are wrapping up our month of self-care. We have one more week of it. In fact, next week we're going to be talking about listening to your body. Ooh, it's going to be so good, because I love anything that has to do with body and understanding it, because I think we ignore a lot of signs that our body is telling us. So we're going to talk about listening to our body. That's how we're going to end this self-love and care. And then in March, we're going to bring the value of resiliency. I love talking about resiliency. Resiliency is a really interesting topic, because it's something that, again, builds over experiences and time. But we're going to talk about resilience in action throughout the whole month and what that looks like. And so I hope you stay with me as we continue to do this solo series this year. And again, if these episodes are resonating with you and you think of someone, please share it with them. My goal of Moxie, I make $0 for Moxie, by the way. I don't necessarily look at stats, and I have actually no goal of monetizing this platform. My goal has always been, since the genesis of Moxie 6 years ago, and now we're 200 plus episodes more over, but since the start of Moxie has always been to encourage. And if that means one person is encouraged in one episode, then it was worth my time. Because again, like we talked about today, you are the start of a ripple. And I don't know what ripples I've created in this world, but man, I'm excited to see it when I get to heaven. Because it's just going to be so beautiful. There's things that we just don't know that we do. So my encouragement to you is to keep showing up for people. Keep showing up and keep encouraging. But do not do that from an empty vessel. Make sure that you care for yourself first. And again, if this resonated with you, please share with others. This community is only this community because of you. So I love each and every one of you. I hope you have an amazing week. And as always, Moxie on.